The most important meal of the day, second breakfast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Second Breakfast podcast. I'm Andy Roth alongside Phil Duvall. Say hi, Phil.
Hello, Andy, and hello, Second Breakfast Nation. Sad day in the world of movie fans.
It's true. Flags at half-mast today.
Yeah, and for a guy, Robin Williams, that we have to talk about. I think honestly, we have to talk about him because of what generation we are, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does.
Because we've made fun of him a lot when he was alive, you and I. And, I mean, Patch Adams is just a fantastic running joke. And it's a little bit different. I've been thinking about this a lot. It's a little bit different than, we talked at a podcast when Philip Seymour Hoffman died, and both of us were just like madly in love with Philip Seymour Hoffman.
It's true.
Like, the guy love that we had for Hoffman was pretty big. And I don't think either of us would say that we're like Robin Williams fans.
But
no,
I think that's true. I just don't think that would have always been true.
That's it. Because every single I'm 35, you're 35. Every single person our age grew up on Robin Williams, and we came of age while he was coming into his own. And I remember watching Mork and Mindy on television.
Yes, me too. And this just popped into my head, and it's like, I think it's probably the wrong time to bring it up, but I don't care, because whatever.
Bring it up now.
So you're a kid, right? And you are hyperactive and over-sugared and over-caffeinated. And what better movie to tap into that with also like a little bit of naughtiness because it's sort of off color than Good Morning Vietnam?
Oh my gosh. Which
came out when we were 8?
8 years old, yeah.
I mean,
we had the soundtrack to that, and we were going on, my family would go on these road trips like to the desert. I have a desert story about Robin Williams. But because we would go on these road trips to Glamis and these other places, these Southern California deserts, we'd go with a group of people in a camper, and we'd like drive in the camper. We'd listen to tapes, and we listened to the Good Morning Vietnam tape. Andy, we listened to that soundtrack with him talking. It was the first of all, it was the first soundtrack I'd ever heard that wasn't just songs.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
The soundtrack is half Robin Williams doing his shtick as Adrian Cronauer.
Yep.
Okay. I had that. I still have it memorized. I have that whole tape. Yet 2 days ago, I was on this cruise ship, and they played Beach Boys' "I Get Around," and I was like, "Good Morning Vietnam," just just like that. And I started thinking about Good Morning Vietnam just like that because I heard Beach Boys' "I Get Around," which might not even be the one that's on there. It might be "Warmth in the Sun." No, I think it's "I Get Around." Either way, point's the same. Reminds me of them, and I like my introduction to the Beach Boys. I mean, it's like, you know how important music is to me, but to have his words all couched around that music and his humor, and like you said, like the caffeinated, hyperactive, which I think for a lot of us as we got older, a lot of us were like, "All right, buddy, like we've grown up, like settle down." But
it's true. That's true. But
the other thing is, we were the generation that like, okay, everybody's like posting things on the Facebook today. Our generation is about like with things from like him from Good Will Hunting or him from Dead Poets Society. They forget that, like, well, maybe they don't forget, but people who would come to him today and be like, "Watch Dead Poets Society." Part of the revelation of Dead Poets Society is that he had never done anything like that before.
Yeah.
Part of the revelation of Good Morning Vietnam was that in the midst of this sort of humor, this great thing was the moments of silence and then fear, and like his ability to turn into, like, give the Robin Williams serious face, and it felt 100% real, you know,
and earned and authentic. Yes.
So for those of us who had grown up on him as just the manic comedian, defining the words manic and comedian, I mean, he was definitive to my understanding of stand-up comedy growing up. I remember, think about, you're gonna love this. So on one of these desert trips, all the kids were like camp or like on the older kids, and like all the adults or mostly adults like got in the dune buggies and rode off to this like dune that was not that far away. You could actually see it from the camp. They were just like, and they all went off, and I like in the evening, and I like snuck over to see what was going on, and I climbed up the dune like kind of like, and as I got closer, I heard they were all basically just a bunch of grown-ups drinking in the desert, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But they were all listening. But they were all listening to Robin Williams live at the Met while they were drinking and hooting and hollering. And so I was sitting here, like, hoping not to get caught, listening to this. And then I was like, a kid. So this infused into me this idea of like, oh, I've heard Robin Williams, but this is the Robin Williams I'm not allowed to hear. And it's like dirty, but not obscene. I mean, he'd use bad words, but it wasn't like, it was just he'd use bad words and like talk about things that were kind of, talk about drugs and like,
sure.
And I was like listening, and it was like, I'm going to get caught any minute now. And so like, that's how I was introduced to like who Robin Williams was.
Sure.
That and Popeye, but that's another story. So to have that be this sort of, he was dangerous, and he was dangerous and friendly at the same time. He was accessible and sort of on the edge for a kid at the same time. That's an amazing like combination for a kid.
Yeah, it's a tough line to walk, but I think I think for years and for the best parts of his career, he did that successfully. I came to his stand up just extremely late. I mean, I think the first thing I ever saw him in was either Good Morning Vietnam or Mork and Mindy, and I just don't remember like when I first saw an episode of Mork and Mindy, right? Because it was in syndication by then, and I just didn't notice it, until I did, right? But I may have been in college before the first time I like sat and experienced one of his like stand-up concerts. Right. On either TV or video, because I never saw him in person. I think he had retired from the stand-up circuit for a while. By the time he had been retired for a while, by the time we were certainly old enough to buy tickets, but it's possible.
Sure, I mean, certainly.
Yeah, and I think maybe he did like what's the benefit concerts and stuff like that. But
Comic Relief. Comic Relief for a while. Yeah.
but I wasn't in a position to buy a ticket to that either. It's just such an interesting, when I think of the sort of cliched, there are two cliches that sort of stand head and shoulders above the rest when it comes to actors or types of actors. And the first and most pervasive, whether it's true or not, is what I really want to do is direct, right?
Sure. And
the other one is the archetype of the funny man who wants to make people cry.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, I started as this, but I want to be this. Like comedy is some sort of like formative stage that you need to move past, like in adolescence or something. And God, that's an entire week of podcasts in and of itself. But for better or worse, the person that I think of when I think of that is Robin Williams, right?
Yeah. Yes. But no, in the sense that I feel like he I feel like some comedians and actors are so engineered and so calculating in their choices, and you can almost see when they make a movie like, oh, I need to make another Oscar bait movie now. Like you can almost see that mentality. And maybe he, and I'm not saying you were saying this. I'm not actually, but a lot of times that goes along with my mindset of like this sort of like, because it's a cliche, you're like, ugh. But Robin Williams never felt like a cliche, right? Like
Agreed.
He felt, I mean, he made some really good movies. He made some monstrously bad movies. He had some really good performances. He had some really meh performances. But I never felt like he was doing anything other than what he wanted to do, which is a really amazing testament to any artist.
Yes. Thank you for saying that and helping me clarify. I'm definitively not saying that, but I think maybe the reason that I think of him when I think of the funny man who wants to turn dramatic is that he might be the only one that it doesn't feel processed.
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
and because you actually believed that that was something he wanted to do. Do
Yes.
you remember? I mean, it's funny that this is going to go down as one of his definitive movies. It really is, because it's a punchline for a lot of people. But for our generation, like Mrs. Doubtfire,
yeah.
like Mrs. And again, he'd already been in some serious movies,
Mm-hmm.
but this was a comedy.
Yep. Yep.
And it starts with him all joking, and it starts with him doing a voiceover for a cartoon, and you're like, oh, it's Robin being Robin. It's like
That's
Manny
right.
being Manny, right? It's
That's
Robin
right.
being Robin, and you're like, okay, got it. And in your little, I was 14, and my 14-year-old brain, everything made sense. I knew where to compartmentalize, where to place this movie in my head.
Right.
And then, like, in the first 5 minutes, Sally Field's like, I want a divorce. And
Right.
you're like, good?
What? Yeah.
And then it shows him in court, like just devastated. And this was like within months of my parents splitting up, and I was at the movie theater with my mom. I know, with my mom.
Right.
So we both are crying, like crying,
Right.
in the first 10 minutes of the movie. And I was like, but this is a comedy.
Yeah.
And it ended up being, and again, like, we're grown-ups now. We're like, yeah, comedies can make you cry. But honestly, even now, like, that movie was really,
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like, this is really funny. By the way, like,
Yeah.
this is the most serious thing that ever was
Yeah. Because even
for this guy.
because even you know, Dead Poet Society had some funny moments and some moments that made you cry, but that wasn't him.
That was a drama. That was a drama.
A, that was a drama, and B, like it didn't. None of those. Not, I won't say none, but few of those emotions turned on him. He was the MacGuffin, right? He was the thing that set the kids in motion, and
Right.
things that happened to the kids were what got you. And Good Morning Vietnam, you certainly, I mean, I laughed my butt off, but I don't know that I cried at the end of it. That wasn't sort of the dramatic arc, if you will, and it you know, and again, you know, it's a really interesting thing because Mrs. Doubtfire may have been the first time that I sort of that he sort of put that out there, you know, like, I'm going to do both in one movie, and there's going to be a movie that will allow me to do that. While it didn't sort of plumb the depths of drama in the same way, I think a similar movie was The Birdcage. There were moments in that movie where, like, yes, and you've got Nathan Lane being all manic, and you've got Robin Williams being funny, and it's a farce, right? I mean, it's based on the Cage aux Folles, which is a farce, and
Sure.
and it works on that level. But there are moments where he pulls it away. He pulls
By that point too. By that point, you're looking at at least 10 years after Good Morning Vietnam, and about 7 or 8 years after Dead Poets, that you're seeing. He's at that point he was Robin Williams, like he was Robin Williams film actor.
That's true.
He'd already won an Academy Award for Good Will Hunting. At that point.
Birdcage came out the year before Good Will Hunting.
Oh, well, I take that back.
But your point remains. He was a guy that had, and this is going to sound like I mean that he's like processed and packaged and cliched, and I don't. By that time, he had sort of conditioned us to expect either from him.
Right. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Because he had done things, and there are a bunch of dramas that or at least dramedies that I haven't seen. Jack, I never saw Jack.
Oh, I saw Jack.
You know, I loved this movie when it came out, and I loved it when I saw it again a couple years later. And it may be terrible, but I remember him being amazing, and I remember loving the movie, and feeling very adult for loving this movie, The Fisher King.
Oh yes.
I honestly, I could watch it now and be like, what the hell? But
No. I've seen it recently, and it holds up.
It holds up. That's
it holds up. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic to hear. Good.
I think what was interesting is movies like that where you like Good Morning Vietnam and Fisher King. Terry Gilliam did Fisher King. Good Morning Vietnam was Barry Levinson, and they both got credit or or in some people got the backhanded compliment of, well, you just directed this personality that was going to be this personality into being this personality on screen in a way that worked for your character. And in both of those cases, I think that is somewhat accurate.
It's not completely unfair, right?
But you start to realize when you see the whole breadth of his work that, like, no, he was a performer, he was an actor, and like he brought an amazing amount of I mean, he was manic, crazy guy in Fisher King, but the heart at the core that was so clear. And
yes.
And like, again, like it's hard to say it. Like, I think the idea that he was a comedian who wanted to act, he just crushed that by the mid '90s. He was just an actor, and it was a thing that he was.
That's right.
The only other person that's done that to that degree is Steve Martin.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve Martin's never won an Oscar, and Steve Martin actually doesn't even get taken nearly as seriously as an actor as Robin Williams did, which breaks my heart a little bit because I think he could. I think he could.
I agree.
I think Bill Murray although Bill Murray was never a stand-up, the fact that he was a stand-up and the fact that he was such a manic and impressionistic and sort of specific kind of stand-up comedian, who was, when you'd see him in interviews, that was what was really interesting for me. As I'm going to be honest, I got really disenchanted with Robin Williams as a performer as I grew up, and part of that reason was, and it wasn't because he wasn't good, he was great. Although, well, again, a lot of his movies were terrible, and he had sort of a Nick Cage thing where the actor's good, but at some point it's like, dude, what are you doing?
Right.
Like,
or
we all have decided you're a good actor. What are you doing? What's going on here?
Right. Or even if I mean, always good might be a little charitable, but always watchable and interesting, doing something that you want to see.
That's right. That's right. And again, I am one of those people who says Nick Cage is a good actor because put him in a good movie and he'll be amazing.
Yep.
And that's true about Robin Williams. It's just, so it's a matter of like, what do you in? Why are you in that? 9 months, really? But like, Bicentennial Man, like What Dreams May Come. I mean, just there's a list. But anyways,
Man.
I was talking to someone recently though. I've never seen What Dreams May Come all the way through. And I was just talking to someone recently. Have you seen What Dreams May Come?
It has been a very long time. A very long time, yeah.
So a guy dies in a car crash, I believe, and his wife kills herself.
Yep.
As a response. And so he goes to heaven and she goes to hell, and then the movie is about him, like, fighting to get to hell to find her and bring her back, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, never seen it. Someone said to me that movie was the best, and this was before he died, that movie was, if you want to know what struggling with depression is like, watch that movie. This person said to me that What Dreams May Come may be the most, like, helpful movie in terms of understanding what it feels like to be someone who struggles with depression.
That's amazing.
And this was before he died, of course. And I so I've never seen it, so I'd like to see that movie now. But I think it's funny, we knew that this guy had, like, we knew that Robin Williams had issues, but here's what I was going to say is I got tired of him because no matter how serious he got in movies, no matter how much Good Will Hunting happened, or how much, or What Dreams May Come, or any of these movies, Jack, or whatever, any movie that he made that was serious or whatever, and how well he was able to harness whatever power he had, whatever talent he had, when you'd see him in an interview, he'd still be so manic and nonstop. Yeah. And it was exhausting.
He was exhausting. He was exhausting, and I say that there's no way to say that without sounding pejorative, and I mean it that way, and I think you do too. But I don't mean it just that way. All right. Again, that the thing that made him exhausting was the thing that made Good Morning Vietnam the perfect movie for an 8-year-old.
Totally. Right. Totally. And I'm saying this as like someone, like we've already discussed and we mean it. Like I grew up, this guy is a formative person in my life in terms of understanding comedy, in terms of understanding a lot of things about movies, and you and I love movies so much. So it's like when I talk about him being exhausting, I don't feel like I'm just like, assigning him a number, like, oh, give him a 4. Like it's more like It's more like this is a guy we've been, look at Robin Williams as an artist.
Yes.
This is him as an artist, as a person, but part of being an artist in our society, part of being an actor, that kind of artist in our society is your public persona.
That's right.
And I more and more feel like I really more and more am feeling like the less I know about any actor, the more I will end up enjoying them.
And yet the catch-22 is that for some unknown reason, Phil, not many people are like us, and they want to know as much as possible. And so I mean, name the actors that you can't find stuff out about, and yet are successful actors. Like they're just so few. For a while, De Niro was doing it.
I was gonna say exactly that. I think to some degree Nicholson does it. Brando did it to some degree.
Right, but Nicholson
to some degree.
And I don't think this is packaged, but Nicholson, like, people who have never seen one of his movies know that he's a Lakers fan. Right?
Sure.
And yes, that's not the same thing as what you're talking about with Robin Williams being manic, but I think it's a way in. It's a way in.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And Robin Williams, he always showed people a lot. I mean, he was always willing to be in front of the camera and be with people and do interviews and do all that stuff.
Yep.
I have heard tale of him being on the Mark Maron's WTF podcast, and apparently that interview is him being pretty serious, which I actually want to listen to that because I've to this day never gotten to just listen to him when he wasn't playing a character.
Right.
Even and so I've always wondered is he one of those classic actors where that was the way he was able to actually be something other than the manic like dervish,
Yeah, I want to talk and I don't have the insight, the training, the education, the anything to sort of draw parallel to his mental illness here, but his something that sort of started getting sprinkled in through the later parts of his career was villain roles or creepy movies.
Well, you and I were both in Alaska.
That's right.
In this past month, and him in Insomnia was fantastic.
I don't think this was a line from Roger Ebert's review of that movie because it doesn't fully sound like him, but I remember very distinctly reading a review of that movie that was like, I appreciate the fact that Robin Williams has given us a psycho who does not feel like a ripoff of Hannibal Lecter.
Nice.
And I think it's true, and I think he's great in that movie. And and what's funny is I haven't seen, just through, you can't see everything, I haven't seen a lot of these movies. I haven't seen 1 Hour Photo. I haven't seen World's Greatest Dad.
Sure.
Like, and I
1 Hour Photo. 1 Hour Photo, Andy.
Yes. Yes. My girlfriend, we were talking about it last night. Yes.
I need to see that again. I'd see that again.
Sure.
So for you, what are the movies? Like, what are the Robin Williams movies? When I say Robin Williams to you, what are the movies that pop up?
Good Morning Vietnam. So I'm going to do this not in the order they came out.
Sure.
But I'm going to
do it in the order of how they pop up in your head.
Yeah, which might be the order I saw them in, but maybe not. I don't know. Good Morning Vietnam, Dead Poet Society, Fisher King, Hook, World According to Garp, Aladdin, of course, Mrs. Doubtfire, Jumanji, The Birdcage.
Jumanji.
Yeah, I know. Again, but again, put another actor in that role, man.
Oh yeah.
No,
I just wouldn't have made the movie in the first place. But fine, that's fine. I hear you.
Fair. Fair.
Yeah.
The Birdcage, Good Will Hunting. Insomnia.
See, this is what I love. My list is totally different than your list.
Sure.
And as you were listing his movies, I was like, oh, right. Like, Like I forgot about Aladdin, which is ridiculous because people have been posting pictures of the genie online in the last 24 hours. But and I grew up on that movie, and he was phenomenal in it.
But I have to be honest, also going on that list, and it's because of how bad he was in it, was like Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet.
Sure.
He had one scene, 3 lines, and I mean...
That movie was... Oh, okay. I loved that movie. I loved that movie.
Mm-hmm.
But Branagh really was like, he made the Spielberg making Lincoln, where if someone winks or blinks or breathes, it's going to be a famous person.
That's right.
That's Hamlet here, but some of the casting was inspired,
and some of it was not.
Some of it was not.
And the 3 that I would like, I mean,
who's one of our favorite actors of all time in that movie, or of all time?
Yeah,
Jack Lemmon is terrible in that movie.
Gerard Depardieu, what is he doing in that movie? What is Robin Williams doing in that movie? And that's what drives me crazy. And I think that's why it makes my list when you ask me what movies do you think of. It's because
it shows the problems.
Well, good, right? And but even in the other problem movies, like I haven't seen Patch Adams, but I'll just take it on faith that it's not very good. Even Bicentennial Man, like I knew why he was in those movies, and that's not the Hamlet is not a problem with him; it's a problem with Hamlet. But that's the movie that I think of. It was like, why was Robin Williams in X? The only one I can come up with for that is...
Never blame Andy. Andy, never blame Hamlet. never blame Hamlet. You have to choose between Hamlet and anybody. You got to blame... You blame Kenneth Branagh. You blame Kenneth Branagh for the bad performance in Hamlet as the director. Okay, so my... let me just start off right. Let me just start off to show you my high level of class.
Go for it.
Popeye. I grew up on Popeye.
Sure.
Not ironically, not like as the guy who was like, oh, I'd better go back and watch Popeye. I didn't know. I mean, which makes it the first Robert Altman film I ever saw. And then I became a film snob and was like, oh, Robert Altman made Shortcuts and The Player. Like, I don't care about Popeye. But no way, dude. Popeye totally was. I watched Popeye over and over and over and over and over again. And you want to talk about who in the world could play Popeye? Nobody but Robin Williams.
Oh, agreed.
I hope that movie gets some sort of... I mean, I haven't watched it in 20 years, so right. I'm full of it. But I'd like to think that, I wasn't so utterly formed by such a crappy movie. I hope it was just...
All I'll say, Phil, is if my guess is right, while you were watching Robert Altman, even Popeye Robert Altman, over and over and over and over again, I was watching... The Cat from Outer Space.
Okay, so I feel
okay. So you're okay.
Even as children, I had better taste.
God, no question.
So yeah, I'd say that Mork and Mindy, and then Live at the Met, because I would sneak the tape and listen to it. Good Morning Vietnam, although again, the soundtrack more than the movie.
Sure.
What an amazing, mind-blowing thing they did on that soundtrack. And then Dead Poets. Here was a big one for me. Toys.
I have never seen Toys.
It is an awful movie.
That's what I hear.
It is a hot mess. And we saw it my family all got on the minivan and went and saw it on Christmas Day.
Oh.
And it was and I loved it when I saw it. And one of my brothers and I were talking about all the greatness about it, and then but it wasn't good. We saw it again later, and you're like, nope, that was a bad movie. But it had some interesting ideas. Here's what I'll say about Toys. Unlike something maudlin, because he got a lot of crap for doing a lot of sort of maudlin, crappy things.
Yeah.
Robin Williams. Toys was a noble failure. Toys was Barry Levinson and Robin Williams making a Barry Levinson passion piece, which I think almost all of Barry Levinson movies are essentially his passion. The guy doesn't do things unless he really wants to.
That's absolutely
for better and for worse.
That's right.
And so Toys was one of these movies where it was a big gamble that totally failed. But I got to say, rather than watching some crappy "we made this movie to make the money," pick, watching a director's noble failures can be really, really interesting and illuminating. And I think Toys Michael Gambon is in it. That was how I was introduced to him.
Wow. All
So
right.
when people were like, when he became Dumbledore, I was like, oh, it's the dude from Toys. Which is so there you go. LL Cool J is in it. Joan Cusack is in it.
Sure.
It's a fascinatingly bad movie. It's not an uninteresting bad movie. It is
Sure.
not. It's not a movie you will soon forget if you see it.
Fair.
And here's a big thing for me. So, I guess in like you're looking at his filmography.
Mm-hmm.
When did Dead Again come out?
Stand by. Stand by.
I'm guessing it came out in like 91, 92.
I believe so.
So
To be perfectly honest, I was checking up on Barry Levinson's filmography, but
Totally-
yes, 91.
totally-
91.
totally legit. Okay, so Dead Again comes out. Dead Again is Kenneth Branagh directing Kenneth Branagh as he does so well.
It's true.
Kenneth Branagh directing himself and his then wife Emma Thompson,
Yes.
they had been in Henry V, and he had made a splash, and so he got to do whatever he wanted. And so he made this very weird Hollywood suspense movie.
Right.
with him.
To be fair, just because, and I don't think you meant it this way, but because that could be taken as snide. As far as people directing themselves go, I think he does a great job.
It was a little
actually do.
snide, and
know.
I should go back and say I love Kenneth Branagh, and my biggest problem with Thor was that he directed it and wasn't in it.
Sure.
Like I was really bummed out. So and if you think I'm kidding, I'm not kidding. Like so I'm with you. Okay.
But it can still be a little snide. I'm with you too.
It was a little too catty. It was a little too catty for a tribute podcast, I admit.
You're all good.
But in this movie, and it's all about Branagh's character and Emma Thompson's character, and then like he's looking for some guy, and he finds this guy. He goes into this back of this deli or something, this meat packing place, and there's this guy sitting in a walk-in, smoking a cigarette with like 5 o'clock shadow and these tiny little glasses, wearing a hoodie, and just looking like a vagrant. And it's Robin Williams in a bit part.
Mm-hmm.
My 12-year-old was blown.
Sure.
Who gets Robin Williams to do a cameo?
Yeah.
It's just it took me almost the entire scene to realize this wasn't a comic interlude.
Right.
It was like really weird for my little brain to figure out how he was allowed to be in this movie, and it really messed me up. And totally I was like, I don't know anything about anything anymore. Robin Williams
Right.
can be a serious cameo in a serious movie out of nowhere and then be gone again.
Right.
And so that kind of thing totally shook me up. But I guess and then Mrs. Doubtfire, huge for me.
Yeah.
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 And I think you're right about Hook. I think you're right about, and I saw Jack, and look again, and then you start reading this movie list, and it's a
Yeah, and you get into Flubber and Father's Day and Patch Adams and
Oh,
Bicentennial Man and
I mean, you
Jakob
just-
the
and
Liar
and it got to the point where he's doing a TV show, and you and I are not watching it,
right,
not even giving it a shot,
right,
and then it gets canceled.
yeah, right. A show with Robin Williams, and not that she is anywhere near his level, but I love Buffy. Sarah Michelle Gellar, and I didn't even consider watching it.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's happening, okay.
Yeah, yes,
And then he kills himself.
and then he kills himself.
And as happens,
Right.
we go, oh, he really mattered to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Oh, he really mattered to me.
Yeah.
Like when you were listing all those movies, I was like, ooh.
Right. Right. They didn't make your
That's-
list, and they still. Yeah, and yours didn't make my list, but they still.
Hook, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember thinking, who else could play Peter Pan all grown up but Rob? I mean,
That's right. That's right.
So many movies he got made because people like us would say, who else but Robin Williams could
Yeah. Yeah.
play Popeye, play Peter Pan all grown up?
Right.
Who could do that? Who could make that role in The Fisher King work?
Right. Right. And
We haven't even talked about Good Will Hunting, and we don't need to. But I mean, because of the. But I just feel like, what I will say is, when you look back on his movie, and he got lashed for this a lot, but it seems like it was always sincere. Um, this is a guy who always had his heart on his sleeve,
Yeah.
even if you didn't actually know what he thought about things.
Yep.
His heart was on his sleeve.
And it seems the outpouring of grief from Hollywood seems genuine.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm impressed that it seems genuine from different Hollywood generations as well, right?
Yep.
People older than he is, his contemporaries, people younger, they're they're all sort of, you know, I remember him when he was coming up. I remember working with him. I remember him when he mentored me. It's all, you know, he seemed he seemed the knock on him that he was a performer instead of an actor, which again is totally not true, lends itself to the he was always himself idea, and the outpouring of grief from Hollywood would seem to echo that.
I will tell you that I am not sure that I actually want actors to be anything but themselves.
Right.
I just fundamentally disagree with the idea that acting isn't anything other than telling the truth. Acting is telling the truth. Good acting is telling the truth. And I don't mind a character. I don't need... Jimmy Stewart never put on a funny accent.
That's right. That's right.
Humphrey Bogart. I mean, and what's like, these guys are icons. They're icons for a reason.
Yeah.
Like Humphrey Bogart, James Stewart, Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn never got rid of that ridiculous accent she had.
I'll be so yeah.
It's ridiculous. Yes. She talks like a crazy person, and we all think it's fine because she's like magnificent and wealthy and just from this other planet of awesome. I don't even know what.
Yes.
And it, you know what? And it wasn't just because those movies were from those days. Like that's the point. It's still that Bill Murray. We need the Bill Murray, the Buster Keaton-esque Bill Murray deadpan in a movie. It makes our movies better.
Yes.
It makes our lives better.
That's the
Steve Martin like glare and like the Steve Martin like all of a sudden freak out.
Yes.
And the sort of his body movement that comes from nowhere.
Yep.
We need that. It makes us better people. And likewise, I think like the Robin Williams barely controlled mania with a heart the size of San Francisco.
Yep.
That makes us better people.
Yes.
I actually think that.
Yes.
Like it makes us better people, you know, like and to have him, I don't know, man, I don't know about you, but I always feel like we talk about like making it to old age. And when you see these guys, when you see people die, when people kill themselves in their 60s, 70s, 80s,
yeah,
you're like, it's never not a choice.
Yeah.
Like there's no such thing as making it. That's a lie.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about depression. I'm talking about life. You know, there's no such thing as like making it past the point of like couples
now I
divorce.
Can relax. Now
couples
I can relax.
Couples divorce after 30 or 40 years of marriage.
Yes.
I'm 6 years in, you know, I'm like, all right, like work at this thing, right? Work at this thing.
Right.
And people who struggle with depression and addiction are struggling with it till the day they die. And we hope that the day that they die is later and from a natural cause, but it is tragic when it's not.
Yeah,
it's tragic when guys like when this happens. It's tragic the Philip Seymour Hoffman thing, and those two things felt connected to me, obviously.
Yeah, they absolutely.
Because the outpouring from people and from our friends and from the things we saw online were so genuinely like,
yeah,
not like this, you know, not like this.
Yeah, agreed. He, I mean, not to be maudlin about it or anything weird, but like, you know, there's a reason that 3 out of every 5 posts on Facebook included the number for like the National Mental Health Helpline or Depression Helpline.
Yes.
You know, it's It's and as I said to you before we started recording, if there's anything, I'm not one to look for meaning in death. I think it's a natural part of life, and that's quite enough meaning. Thank you.
We're all set with meaning here.
You're right. But if there is meaning in Robin Williams' death, hopefully it will come out of the fact that if we are sick, we go to a doctor. If we break our leg, we go to a doctor. If our mind is broken, we get judged. And broken's the wrong word. If there is a disease of the body, we get it fixed. If there's a disease of the mind, we need to just be, as a society, as individuals, we need to be of the mindset that this is just something that we need to get fixed. And the problem is, like if I see you with a broken leg, I feel like I don't need to tell you, go to the doctor, right? But
yes.
But part of the problem with depression is it's insidious in that it makes you feel like helpless in a way that precludes you from getting help. And so if there is a difference between a disease of the body and a disease of the mind, it's that the people around you are even more important.
I agree with everything you've just said, and I want to take it even one step further, and I don't know if this is too far, but I want to say everything that you just said is true. That we need to. I'm glad that people are looking at this death as a way to speak up about depression and say this isn't something people should be ashamed of. I mean, I have several friends that tried to kill themselves in high school and didn't. I have two friends that succeeded in killing themselves in high school. So I take this. To me, suicide was never a shameful thing. It was never going to be something I did, even when I was at my lowest. But it was not because I'm so whatever. It's just because I like myself way too much. I mean, like I do. I mean, I really like. We joke about it, but it's really true. Like my sense of self-esteem and self-preservation is not ever going to allow that kind of craziness. But craziness is what it is, and I mean craziness. Like, not everybody uses the word crazy to be mean, but like, it is an insanity that tells you that you're not valuable and that you're not worth living. It is craziness that teaches people that their life isn't worthy and that their life isn't something, and that's something to be fought, and that's something to be struggled against and fought against for as much as possible, because it's not fair that anyone should have to feel that. But I will say this too: one, everything you said, don't be ashamed. Like it is a disease. You don't get mad at people for having a broken leg. It affects you in ways. It's insidious. All these things. But I want to go even further. Please. It's not. It's that. If anything, it might also teach us that some things don't get cured in this life, and no one wants to talk about that. Yeah. Like, we can fight the fight to stave off certain things. My dad had a kind of cancer that was incurable. I mean, in the sense that you could cut it out, but it came from the bone marrow, so you could even do a bone marrow replacement. You could do all this stuff, but essentially, like leukemia, it's similar to leukemia. People who have leukemia for the rest of their lives. Mm. It's just whether or not it's in remission, or if it's being, whatever you want to call. Right. Whereas if you have a certain tumor that cut out, you may be cancer free, but like you're never actually cancer free. It's just part of who you are. You're not actually cured. Right. And there are things that that don't get cured in this life. They just don't. Yeah. And so I would go even further in saying it's not just with Robin Williams. Gosh, like, know that there are people in your life and you need to help them fix this. It's that there are people in your life that this isn't something that can be fixed. It's something that can be managed. Right. It's something that can be held on to, that you can love them through it, that you can care with them, walk alongside them in the midst of this. But like, we are all fighting terrible, difficult battles in our lives, and some people's battles are more terrible and difficult than others. Yeah. And not winnable in this life. And so like, we have such an obsession with fixing a problem. Right. Are we done? Is it over? Have we won? And so I hope that this conversation about depression that Robin Williams' death brings up, I hope it brings up this reality that a cure or a solving of the problem may not end up being our primary focus. It may be that we just have to. I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't be working on that. Work on that. But the vast majority of people in this world, and the people that we talk to, aren't neuroscientists and psychotherapists. the vast majority aren't those things. So there are
Right.
people who are going to be working on, and chemists. Work on those things, you people. The rest of us who have no real ability to work on a cure for depression,
Right.
like, recognize that it's an incurable disease oftentimes, and that we have a job to do. And the job is not to cure it, because we don't know how, you and I,
Right.
but it's to care for people who have it. It's to love people, and it's to be as there for people as we can be. And then it's to mourn if and when it doesn't work.
And yes, beautifully said. Beautifully said. And you know, another thing we were talking about before we started was you know, sort of the parallels with Philip Seymour Hoffman and his battles with addiction. And I think it's the same thing. You know, like,
Yes.
an alcoholic can only be recovering. He cannot be recovered. A drug addict can only be, you know, on the wagon. You know, you can't be no longer an addict.
I'm grateful for I'm grateful for the AA program, for 12-step programs, and for the work that they've done in creating a safe space. What happened was, it's a safe space of anonymity where people can recognize. But what happens in those spaces is that people recognize that it's not shameful to suffer, and that it's not that these things are something that other people have, and it's not, you are not alone.
Yep.
And so I'm grateful that that in the two deaths we've mentioned, Philip Seymour Hoffman and Robin Williams, a large part of the conversation is around, like, just the emphatic insistence that we stop being a culture that acts ashamed of these things.
Yeah.
You know.
I think that's as good a place as any to stop.
One last thing I have to say.
Yes.
Robin Williams was an Episcopalian. And not, like, born an Episcopalian and therefore, like, they call me that, but that's not really my thing.
Yeah.
Like, my daughter's showing up. Hello, Paige. Not just that, but, like, he's an Episcopalian, like, who was a guy who talked about being an Episcopalian, and
Nice.
who was, like, so for me as a priest, as an Episcopal priest, like, when I say that when I say that this isn't something that's cured on this side of the world, in this life, I have a belief about Robin Williams, and he held that belief as well.
Yeah.
And I hope that it's true, and I hope that the suffering that he feels is not just over because his body's dead, but, like,
Right.
that in reality his soul is given rest from this, and that what he and I have both believed about that is true.
I
You know.
see.
So that's all I want to say.
I have no reason to think that everyone doesn't feel the same way. You know.
Right.
I mean, I
totally.
really.
No,
like,
I'm with you.
like-
Totally.
God forbid, literally,
Literally.
that the reason his suffering is over is just because he physically can't feel suffering anymore. You
Yeah.
know, I if that's the case, then that's the case. But one can hope.
Yeah.
With that, folks, go watch Dead Poet Society or Good Morning Vietnam, or if you want to, Patch Adams, but I would question your judgment. Yeah, I mean, you know.
I think Robin Williams would question you. Don't watch that. Don't come on.
Come on. Father's Day, what are you doing?
Don't watch that. I'm
Man
gonna watch
of the year.
I am totally gonna watch Mrs. Doubtfire in the next week, and Dead Again. Those are the two that I'm gonna watch the next
Awesome.
week.
Love it. Love it. All right. Well, folks, Robin Williams, rest in peace. And this will bring us to the end of another Second Breakfast podcast. For Phil Duvall, I am Andy Roth. We are Second Breakfast, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
The most important meal of the day, second breakfast.